Marcus Reed was the kind of man most people overlooked. At 38, he was a quiet black single father who lived with his 12-year-old son, Jordan, in a modest American neighborhood. Marcus worked long hours repairing industrial equipment, handled every responsibility at home, and made sure Jordan never felt the absence of his mother too deeply. He was strong, disciplined, and physically fit, but he never talked about his past. To his neighbors and even to most of his friends, he was simply a hard-working father who preferred a peaceful life. What nobody knew was that Marcus had spent years training in combat sports before walking away from competition. He had learned that real strength did not need an audience. After becoming a father, he decided that protecting his son and building a stable home mattered more than trophies. Jordan had recently started training at a local martial arts academy. He loved the discipline, the atmosphere, and the feeling of learning something difficult. His instructor, Derek Stone, was a muscular, black belt champion in his early 30s who had won several regional tournaments. Derek was talented, but he had a habit of humiliating students who were less experienced. He believed fear made people stronger. Whenever someone failed a technique, Derek would laugh. Whenever someone challenged his methods, he reminded them that he was the champion. Marcus didn't like Derek's attitude, but he kept quiet because Jordan enjoyed training there. He stood near the wall during most classes, watching his son practice. Derek noticed Marcus one evening and asked, "You always stand there. You ever trained before?" Marcus smiled politely. "A little." Derek laughed. "A little?" Marcus nodded. "Nothing serious." Derek looked him up and down. "You don't look like much of a fighter." Marcus didn't respond. Jordan looked embarrassed, but his father simply placed a hand on his shoulder and said, "Let's focus on your training." A few days later, Derek was demonstrating a sparring exercise when Jordan made a mistake. Derek stopped the class and told everyone to watch. "This is what happens when someone thinks knowing a few moves makes them a fighter." Jordan lowered his head. Marcus immediately stepped forward. "That's enough." The room became quiet. Derek turned toward him with a grin. "Excuse me?" Marcus spoke calmly. "He's learning. You don't need to embarrass him." Derek laughed. "And what are you going to do about it?" Marcus didn't answer. Derek walked closer. "Maybe you should get on the mat and show your son what confidence looks like." Marcus shook his head. "I'm here for my son, not for a fight." Derek smiled arrogantly. "That's what people say when they're afraid." A few students exchanged looks. Marcus remained calm. Derek continued, "Come on. One round. You wouldn't last 10 seconds. Someone in the back laughed. Jordan looked at his father. "Dad, you don't have to." Marcus looked at his son and smiled. "I know." Then he turned toward Derek. "But I'll accept." The room went completely silent. Derek looked surprised for a moment before smiling. "Good choice." Marcus removed his jacket and stepped onto the mat. He wore a simple dark t-shirt and athletic pants. There was nothing about his appearance that suggested he had ever competed professionally. Derek began stretching dramatically, making sure everyone was watching. "You sure about this?" Derek asked. Marcus nodded. "I am." The match began. Derek moved quickly, expecting Marcus to panic. He threw a fast, controlled strike, but Marcus stepped aside effortlessly. Derek attacked again. Marcus moved backward, studying him. The students began whispering. Derek became frustrated. He increased his speed. Marcus continued avoiding every attack without throwing a single unnecessary strike. 10 seconds passed. Then 20. Derek's confident smile disappeared. 30 seconds. Marcus suddenly caught Derek's wrist during an attempted strike and redirected his movement. Derek stumbled forward. Marcus released him immediately. Nobody laughed now. Derek stared at him. Marcus simply said, "You're fast." Derek's pride was hurt. He attacked again. Marcus shifted his weight, stepped around him, and gently brought him off balance. Derek landed on the mat. The entire room froze. Marcus offered him a hand. "Are you okay?" Derek stared at the hand, then at Marcus. He slowly stood. "How did you do that?" Marcus smiled slightly. "Years of practice." Derek looked toward the other students. "Who are you?" Marcus didn't answer. Jordan was staring at his father with an expression he had never seen before. Pride, But before anyone could say anything else, the academy's owner, Coach Williams, walked into the room. He had watched the entire match from the doorway. His face had changed completely. He looked at Marcus and whispered, "I know you." Marcus's expression became serious. Coach Williams continued, "You competed years ago." Marcus Reed. The students looked at each other. Derek's eyes widened. Coach Williams remembered. Years earlier, Marcus had been one of the most disciplined competitors in the region. He had defeated fighters far more experienced than himself, but he eventually disappeared from competition. Derek looked stunned. "You were that Marcus Reed?" Marcus nodded. "I used to be." Coach Williams asked quietly, "Why did you stop?" Marcus looked toward Jordan. "Because I became a father." The room became silent again. Marcus picked up his jacket. "I don't need to prove anything anymore." But Derek wasn't ready to accept what had happened. He looked at Marcus and said, "One match doesn't prove you're better than me." Marcus smiled calmly. "It doesn't have to." Then he walked toward his son. Jordan followed him, but Derek remained standing on the mat, staring after them. For the first time in his career, the black belt champion had discovered something more frightening than a stronger opponent. He had discovered a man who didn't care about winning, and that made Marcus almost impossible to intimidate. The following morning, Marcus expected the previous night's confrontation to be forgotten. He didn't want attention, and he certainly didn't want Jordan becoming the subject of gossip at school. But by the time he arrived at the academy with his son, everyone already knew what had happened. Students whispered whenever Marcus walked past. Some looked at him with admiration, while others stared at Derek, waiting to see what the champion would do next. Derek arrived shortly after them. For several minutes, he said nothing. Finally, he walked toward Marcus. "I want another match." Marcus looked at him. "No," Derek frowned. "Why?" "Because you don't need one." Derek's frustration grew. "You embarrassed me." Marcus shook his head. "You embarrassed yourself." Jordan looked nervous, but Marcus calmly continued. "Yesterday wasn't about proving I was better than you. It was about stopping you from teaching my son that strength means humiliating people." Derek looked away. Those words stayed with him. Coach Williams stepped forward and said, "Marcus is right." Derek looked at him. Coach Williams explained that martial arts was supposed to teach control, discipline, and responsibility. Winning competitions was only one part of the journey. If a black belt could defeat everyone but couldn't control his own ego, then he had learned the techniques but missed the lesson. Derek remained silent. Later that afternoon, he found Marcus outside the academy. "I've been thinking," Derek said. Marcus waited. "I was wrong." Marcus nodded. Derek continued, "I thought being feared meant being respected." Marcus replied, "A lot of people make that mistake." Derek looked at him. "How did you learn not to?" Marcus smiled. "My son." Derek seemed surprised. Marcus explained that before Jordan was born, he had been obsessed with competition. Every victory made him want another one. Every defeat made him angry. Then his life changed when his son was born. "I realized Jordan didn't need a father who could beat everyone," Marcus said. "He needed a father who knew when not to fight." Derek looked down. "That's harder than winning." Marcus smiled. "Much harder." Over the following weeks, Derek changed his teaching style. He stopped humiliating beginners. When students made mistakes, he corrected them instead of laughing. He began teaching discipline rather than fear. Jordan noticed the difference immediately. One evening after class, Derek approached Jordan. "You're improving." Jordan smiled. "Thanks." Derek nodded. "And your dad was right." Jordan laughed. "About what?" Derek smiled. "About me." Meanwhile, Marcus had started helping with advanced training at the academy. He never demanded recognition, and he refused to be called a master. He simply taught students how to remain calm under pressure, how to protect themselves responsibly, and most importantly, how to walk away when walking away was the strongest choice. Several months later, the academy held a local martial arts demonstration. Derek was invited to perform, but instead of taking all the attention for himself, he asked Marcus to stand beside him. The crowd became quiet when Derek spoke. "Months ago, I challenged this man because I thought strength meant being able to defeat someone." He looked toward Marcus. "I was wrong." Marcus remained calm. Derek continued, "He could have humiliated me, Instead, he taught me. The crowd applauded. Jordan stood near the front with a proud smile. After the event, Marcus walked outside with his son. Jordan looked up at him. Dad? Yeah? Were you really that good when you were younger? Marcus smiled. I was good. Jordan laughed. How good? Marcus looked at him. Good enough to survive 10 seconds. Jordan laughed loudly. Marcus smiled. They walked home together beneath the evening sky. Behind them, the academy lights remained on. And inside, Derek was teaching a group of young students. The man who once laughed and said, "You wouldn't," last 10 seconds had finally learned that the strongest person in the room was not always the loudest, the biggest, or the one with the most trophies. Sometimes it was the quiet father who stepped onto the mat for his son and stepped off without needing anyone to call him a champion.